Today on the program, the Department of Agriculture announced they will not require religious schools to follow new Title IX regulations. Why not? Is this good news for religious freedom or a cynical political move? We'll talk about that today. In addition, Boston's Children's Hospital has created a lot of attention because of their promotion of their new gender clinic. The details are horrifying, but it's important that you know what's happening in Boston and around the country. So we will talk about it today. In addition, the Department of Justice released the warrant that was used to search President Trump's home in Florida, but they will not release the affidavit that was used to get the warrant. Is this important? We'll talk to a 20-year veteran of the Department of Justice to get his take. But first, the headlines for today. Earlier this afternoon, President Biden signed into law the Inflation Reduction Act, curiously named, which was leftovers from the failed Build Back Better Act and the Green New Deal. Already, makers of electric cars have hiked prices by an amount that coincidentally mirrors the tax credit provided for the purchase of those vehicles. Anyone who takes such a tax credit should be careful with their math. After all, the bill also provides funding for 87,000 new IRS agents to make sure you carry the one correctly. What else is there to say about this bill? And with me now to talk about it is Dr. Dave Brat. He's the dean at Liberty University's School of Business and a former member of Congress. Dr. Brat, welcome back to the show.
Hey, great. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Well, it's called the Inflation Reduction Act, but the one thing that everyone seems to agree on is that it will not, in fact, reduce inflation. Why not?
Yeah, well, we're right now experiencing stagflation, which is the worst of both worlds. We just had 2 quarters of back-to-back economic shrinkage, right? Economic growth is negative. And on top of that, we got, 9.1 inflation down to 8.5, but it's still 40-year highs. And so in the midst of that, the government comes up with another $1 trillion spending spree that's been validated by the Fed, the Federal Reserve money printing machine. And so that's stimulative. And so the political level, right, the politicians don't want us to go into a terrible recession coming up before elections. And so they're stimulating. But if you stimulate the economy with $1 trillion more government spending, that's inflationary. And so now they've locked in, and in addition to the federal government spending another, $800 billion, the Federal Reserve System, if you go out and Google M2 growth, right, just go out to Fred, F-R-E-D, that's the Federal Reserve database, and just type in M2 growth, you'll see they're still printing 6% more money. And so they claim to be contractionary on monetary policy, but they're not even contractionary there, right? They really haven't done much to reduce the balance sheet, and they're still printing 6%. You're supposed to match the percentage increase in money stock with the percentage of GDP growth. So if the economy is shrinking or zero growth, you shouldn't be printing any money. And so they're stimulatory on both the fiscal side and the monetary side. So it's a disaster that spells long-term, higher, enduring inflation. And I think we're going into a more serious recession as well.
Well, Dr. Brat, at the signing press conference today, President Biden seemed to suggest that inflation was actually over. Let's play clip 7, and then I want you to respond to this.
Before I begin today, I want to say a word about the news that came out today relative to the economy. Actually, I just want to say a number: 0. Today, we received news that our economy had 0% inflation in the month of July. 0%.
Dr. Brat, does that mean inflation is over?
Not by any means. If you want to know what the American citizen and consumer thinks about that statement, go out to the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Study. That's the main economic indicator, right, for the non-economists out there. That's the measure most used by economists to measure how Americans are feeling about the economy. And their feelings match their indications of the present economic conditions as well as the future expected conditions that are coming up. All three are the same. They're going straight down. And not only are they down, they're at all-time lows. In fact, the consumer is feeling about exactly the same level as at the bottom of the 07-08 financial crisis. And so if you want to ignore, 300 million people and the pain they're feeling and the expectations they have for the economy, which is that they're going to continue this feeling, and their family budgets are getting pinched in every direction, and they're feeling real pain. Politically, I don't think that's a wise thing to do.
Well, Dr. Brat, what is he trying to say then when he says there's 0% inflation? Is he just making that up to try to make people feel better? What's the point? Is there any support for what he said?
Yeah, I mean, they made an error, but the president has, people that write the lines. The month-to-month thing went down, right? So there's, the month-to-month increase is zero, but to say you don't have any inflation is just a huge whopper. And so, they do this. The mainstream media prints a bald-faced whopper, and then, the next day they'll retract back on page 8,092 somewhere.
Is his point that inflation from July of 2022 compared to 21 was actually quite high, but it didn't increase anymore from June to July? So is that where he says there's 0% growth? It's really high based on last year, but July wasn't any worse than June, so he's saying there's zero growth?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. And so, of course,
he didn't say there's zero growth. He said there's zero inflation, and he meant what he said. He knew what he was saying. I know. Yeah.
Well, I want to. There's another thing that he could have issues with here, because I want to go ahead and play clip 6, because he may have a George Bush Sr. moment here. Let's go ahead and play that one.
And I'm keeping my campaign commitment. No one, let me emphasize, no one earning less than $400,000 a year will pay a penny more in federal taxes.
Dr. Brat, we know that was a big campaign promise of his. Is he keeping that promise?
No, his buddies on the left, right? The left is very good at marketing and messaging, and so they are still ironically casting Republicans as the big business party. Well, the biggest 5 tech firms in the U.S. right now include, Facebook and Google and Microsoft and Amazon, et cetera. Those 5 tech firms are worth more than all the market cap of Europe combined. And all 5 of those firms are noticeably guided by leftist thinkers who support Biden. And so if you think Biden is going to tax his buddies, I got another thing coming for you politically. That ain't going to happen. And so they're going to raise the money, and now everybody knows it's going to go way down into the middle class. And so the Dems are going into an election in November on this. And again, I wouldn't want to be them right now. The consumer is very upset. You're going to be facing tax increases. No one likes that. If you'll notice also, none of this has to do with the supply side of the economy. Everything's always demand side on the left. It's more fake money printing, more government spending or whatever. No one talks about business, right? The supply side, incentivizing innovation, entrepreneurship, capital, deepening capital investment in our kids' skill sets and K-12 education, getting them ready for a workforce. Those are all noticeably absent, right? And as a result, productivity, you can go out to Northwestern's got the leading economist in the world on that. And he's shown productivity growth has been going down for 40 years in a row. Robert Gordon, if you want to Google him, and it's at 0 now. Total factor productivity is the only variable that causes long-run economic growth. And it's not an error. I did a PhD in economics. And so the other things cause growth, but they all level out. Total factor productivity is the only thing that causes long-term economic growth, and what made us rich. And that's coming to an end. It's at 0. And so that's why you're seeing all these shortcuts and tricks with monetary policy and fiscal policy, because they've run out of bullets on the real economy.
Talking to Dr. Dave Brat from Liberty University. Dr. Brat, conventional political wisdom says you don't raise taxes during an inflation. We are having all sorts of debates about the definition of words. And I'm sorry, you don't raise taxes during a recession. I know I said that wrong.
That's right.
But the Biden administration points to recent job growth numbers, which were good, and says that means that's proof that we are not in a recession. He doesn't deny that he's raising taxes. He says he's not raising taxes on those who make less than $400,000 a year. How should we be defining what a recession is? Are we in a recession despite good job numbers?
Yeah, we're in a recession. 70% of the economy is consumption, right? In the U.S. economy, and that's basic macro. In your first course, you get C plus I plus G plus net exports. I probably just freaked out the audience, and they're having nightmares tonight. And so consumption 70%. I just described that. The consumer is at all-time lows in terms of their feelings about the economy. 2 quarters in a row gets you a recession. And then they mentioned the labor market reports are good, and they were okay on the data side. But when you add that to what I just mentioned about productivity, that's the connector between labor and GDP growth, right? So you got more workers, but we're producing less stuff. And so people don't care how many people are working. You care how much you're consuming. How much stuff do I get with my paycheck? I want real stuff. And that's GDP, right? The famous Milton Friedman quip was, hey, if you want to maximize jobs, just give everyone a teaspoon to dig holes to build a highway, right? Then you'll maximize labor. No one's interested in maximizing the amount of labor. We want to maximize the effectiveness of labor, give the American worker capital to work with. That's what made us the richest country on earth. And our productivity and capital investment is nil right now. And so we're not doing any of the right moves. And there's no sign that we're moving in the right direction. Everyone's politicizing the entire economy. And the Republicans better be careful to do the right thing themselves coming up. I haven't heard a whole lot of leadership out of our side either saying anything positive about
Dr. Brat, in about 25 seconds, what does this mean for the average American?
It means we're in for probably a decade of pain, right? We've been faking ourselves out. The American voter has allowed this to happen. It's on us. It's on you out there. If you want change and you want responsible leadership, I'd get some responsible leadership who knows economics and political economy.
Dr. Dave Brat, it's not good news, but we appreciate you sharing it with us today. Thank you for being with us.
God bless you, brother. God bless you.